back to the Crazy Mayday channel. Today it's a little windy, but we're going to attempt to get my underbelly back underneath the camper. When we first got this thing, there was a little bit of issues with our hot water heater, and they resolved them at the dealer before we took ownership, so I was very grateful for them to do that. I have had a couple campers in the past, and taking the underbelly down reveals a lot of scary skeletons. And you know, at the factory they're not really doing all that like care of zip tying wires up, making sure nothing gets pinched and stuff like that. When they're building these at the factory, they make it as easy as possible for the workers to actually assemble these things. They're not struggling like you or myself would have to do after the fact. So going back under the underbelly and kind of getting this just neatened up, get your wires, you know, zip tied up, just take your time. You know, this doesn't have to be like a weekend project. Try to give yourself a little bit of extra time, because you're going to find some things that going to probably make you upset. So just try to have some good patience. Get yourself a creeper and basically some rough, raggedy clothes, because you're going to get a little dirty. There are a lot of sharp objects under here, so you know, do wear some gloves and some safety protection, because there's things that are up under there that, you know, are kind of left under there from the manufacturer, and it could get in your eye, so you don't want to end up at the doctor's office. So I'm going to kind of get down on the creeper, and I'm going to roll under here, and I'm going to kind of give you an idea of what I did to just check over some wiring, make sure you can, you know, neaten everything up as best you can. You're going to want to probably buy a 200 pack of zip ties. You're going to go through a lot. I just like to make everything neat and hopefully, you know, kind of like prevent a problem from happening. This is kind of like a one and done. When you do this, you don't want to ever have to pull this back open again, unless you have like a tank leak or something that's just forcing you to go back in there. So if you can do all the preventative you can, there's tank heaters on these tanks. You want to try to get them good and adhered. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that we want to try to take care of, you know, on the first go around, so that way you never have to go back under here again. I'm going to set the camera up down underneath, and we'll continue on with the video, so hang in there for a second. Alright, so we're on our creeper. It is a little bit of windy day, so excuse the wind noise if it happens to kind of overtake the mic. So we're going to creep under here. It's kind of be like a little B-roll of just rolling under, and I'll kind of point and explain everything as we go along the camper here. Alright, so as you're coming under, you're going to see all your mechanicals. Basically, you have a whole bunch of wiring. Here, let me get the camera to adjust a little bit better here. Here we go. So spray foam is another thing that you guys are going to want to try to do. You're going to want to probably get a couple cans of this stuff, and you want to seal all these holes up, because this is where all those mice and bugs and critters are going to be coming in here to live. This is going to be a nice cozy environment for them. So as you can see, I kind of just zip tied all my wires up. This is where I ran the extra wire for the reverse light function. So, you know, I kind of knew that I was coming under here anyway to do some extra modifications. So just basically going along, you know, zip tying everything up. As you can see, you got your rack and pinion motors there. I like to give them a little bit of a greasing. Basically, there's a little pan of what it looks like to be underneath. But now you have your gear motor there. this is another spot that I saw in another YouTube video that's very nice. So these openings are cut through the frame. I actually cut out nice little rubber pieces of a mud flap, and I was able to use some cardboard and make a little template to really just seal this up. And these are just flat pieces of rubber that I siliconed in and let them sit overnight to dry. And now you have a nice tight seal around here, not so tight that it causes extra friction, or it, it causes, these teeth to get tangled in the rubber, but it just keeps the critters out. And that's basically going to make you and whoever else that's going to want to be under here, a little more satisfied. So as you can see, I got my tank heaters. I went and I wrapped them with some Gorilla Tape, because these things do work when they, hang on, my camera got a little, they do work when they're attached, but as soon as they basically come unattached, they're worthless. I'm going to pause you here for a minute. So like I was saying, sorry I had a little camera mishap. The wiring and everything under here, you're just going to want to basically do the best you can to neat and tidy everything up. Just make sure there's nothing going to be rubbed and basically chafed and then cause some kind of short to the systems that are in these campers now. It seems like they're more and more of a smart camper versus back in the day where you just had basically no frills in a camper. It was just a nice shelter with no real electronics or amenities. So as you can see, basically as we go down here, all these entry points basically are just one big gaping open hole that, they make it easy for them to get their stuff up and where they need to go. They're not looking at, oh, is this going to keep bugs out, or is this going to allow mice to come in? So that's when, all this spray foam kind of comes in handy. You know what I mean? Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, damn, if I ever have to get back in here to run, wire, or there's some kind of issue, I'm going to have all that spray foam to deal with. Yes, but that's kind of why you're here. If a wire is good or a hose is not, if it's in a safe spot, it should not have the potential to cause you an issue later on. It's already got its protecting, its insulation around itself. So in a nice tight loom like this, basically it should stay doing what it needs to do pretty much for as long as you basically have your camper. So we're just gonna keep on cruising down here. I'll show you a little bit more. You have some of your heat lines. I've seen these things be pinched to the point where they're not even doing any kind of, sense of airflow. And a lot of this stuff too, when you're talking about it, it's the reason that your underbelly is drooping, right? Because all this stuff is basically laying on here. You know what I mean? It's weighing it down. So by you going through here and basically picking this up and making everything kind of just neat and tidy and zip tied up real good, you're gonna basically save your underbelly from coming down. we're just moving on down the camper here. Here's all your sensors for your auto leveling. Those are the gyros. You have your slide out motors again. This is another good time, you know, to give this a good heavy like lubrication. You know, it's never going to see the light of day again, so you might as well give it some, you know, love and care now while you have access to. So that's all that. Basically, you know, all your harnesses, you have gas line, you know, being run. So up here, I'm gonna just talk for a minute. I'm gonna try to zoom the camera out so you guys can get a better angle here. So basically, everything that you see up here in these gray electrical boxes, there's the battery disconnect. The battery disconnect used to be way up front under here, which was underneath of our propane. That was an okay spot. I just didn't like the way that, you know, Rockwood does a pretty good job, but you know, there are some manufacturers out there that just don't give a crap. You know, it's working now while it's on the assembly line. Doesn't mean it'll work in a month from now. A lot of their connections were just opened and exposed to the elements. So again, this is another trip to the Lowe's or the Home Depot supply house. You know, I added this also. You want to protect these electrical components. There's nothing protecting these from the elements. Basically, all the road spray coming back from your truck is basically going to, you know, splash up under here. There's no underbelly protection for any of this stuff. So if these components, you know, over time get rust, corrode out, you know, you're gonna have headaches. The system's gonna work harder. You're gonna start blowing fuses, you know, and you know, you're gonna be like trying to figure out why your camper is not charging, or you know, some weird mystery like it only works when it's plugged into the truck, but when I unplug, I get nothing. So keeping all your connections sealed in one of these little 4x4 electrical conduit boxes will do you wonders over the years. You know, neaten up all your wiring, get it loomed, get it zip tied tight, use silicone when you have to. Everything is nice and sealed now. Everything is clean. There's no drooping lines anywhere down below. Everything has a nice circuit breaker, and it's just, you know, the quality now is what you expect when you actually buy one of these campers. You know, if it was done like this from the factory, you know, I think they could do it, and they could still do it and make a profit. It's just they're not there to do that. So you really got to, you know, I don't know. I feel like I keep rambling on a little bit, but I look at it as it's an investment. You know, it's not a, you know, a cheap thing. I want to make it last as long as it can last. I want to have as problem-free camper as possible. Now, everybody knows that's probably a dream, because anytime you use this thing, anytime it's just sitting here, problems are starting to scratch at the surface. I mean, it's you know, it's what it is. So I try to do all the hard work right out of the gate while everything is still brand new and fresh. There's no rot. If you buy a used camper, you know, someone else may have, you know, did some of this stuff. They might have not done any of this stuff. So getting it done now kind of like puts everything to bed for you, at least as much as you can do, you know. So whenever you go out and camp, you're gonna know that it's like, I can go and camp and relax and enjoy the camping experience to the fullest. You're not gonna be saying, damn, I get to the campground, I'm gonna have to pull off a wheel, or I'm gonna have to crawl under there and fix a leak, or I have a wire when I open up my slide that seems to short the fuse, and then it's a trip back to the dealer, and it's no time being used by you and your family to enjoy it for what you intended to buy it for, to do with it. So I get it, not everybody's going to be mechanically inclined to do this or have the energy to go through and do all this stuff. It has taken many, many, many weeks of constant, after work, weekend, to make this thing the way it is now. So I just want to give you that little bit of information, a little bit of video. I know the video is a little wonky. It's tight under here. So I'm going to get putting back to the underbelly, and then I'm going to actually get some of our underglow lighting installed at the same time. I'll try to do a little bit of footage here and there to show you how it's kind of done, and we'll go from there. So I'll see you in a little bit. Peace.